All right, YouTube. This Detroit's HPTV coming to you out of Detroit, back with another video. It's early Sunday morning, and I know a lot of my subscribers and a lot of the folks out there going to church, so you probably see this video when you come back from church, or if you up, you'll catch it now. But I have a serious topic, and the topic is serious because it's like we're not paying attention to what we're seeing, or we're not realizing that there is a after effect of this election that has never been seen before in any other election. There is one of the largest mental health crises in the history of this country going on right now. People are having mental breakdowns. People are becoming unhinged. People are becoming radicalized. People are terrified of the future. People are scared that their livelihoods are going to be taken. Some are even scared of their freedoms and their rights are going to be taken because they have been fear mongered. They have been terrorized for months on end. For months on end, the fear mongering reached such a fever pitch that they were calling conservatives Nazis, fascists. They were saying racist. I mean, every negative connotation that you could think of, they were throwing at the American people, throwing at minorities to terrify them. They were trying to scare them into voting a particular way, even though that way that they wanted them to vote went against God and country. They wanted people to vote for late term termination of pregnancy all the way up to the 8th month. They wanted people to vote for gender reassignment of children as young as 8 all the way down to 5 and 2 years old. They wanted them to vote for tampons in the boys' bathroom, open borders, amalgamation, all kind of debaucherous things that they hid under the guise of inclusion. All these things were antichrist, anti-God, and they were on the ballot. And they used fear and coercion to persuade the masses of people to vote that way. And then when it didn't work, they continue on with the fear mongering. Just think, you have that B4 movement where women are vowing to be celibate and shaving their heads, and you have all the crazy conspiracy theories about what's going to happen. You have people alienating themselves from their families. You had people like Joy Reid telling you that if your family member voted a certain way, don't spend the holidays with them. You had these people coming out manipulating your minds. This was one of the greatest psychological operations in the history of the world. They want to tell you about what happened in Germany, about how that man used propaganda to turn the whole country against another race of people. Think about it. The propaganda that they say that the fascists and the Nazis used in Germany, they used it to turn against a whole another nationality of people. They demonized them. They made them less than human so that he could implement his nefarious agenda. Where have you seen that being done? Anywhere else in the world where people are using language, propaganda, the media to demonize their adversaries or political opponents. That's what you're seeing in this country. Everything that the Democratic Party says that the conservatives was going to do, they are actually doing. That is a political attack. That is a political tactic to where you accuse your enemy of the things you're doing. And that's how you sway public opinion. See, a lot of us, we don't think that deep. We don't think like strategists. We don't think Machiavellian. We don't think like Sun Tzu. We don't think that like a chess player. We play checkers one move at a time. We don't think 5 moves ahead like the powers that be. This government spends trillions of dollars on psychological warfare. Anything I'm saying on here, you can Google and find out yourself. They spend more money on psychological warfare than they do on actual weapons. You have to assume that everything that you say in this country is heard That's how much we are surveilled. While at the same time, all the psychological warfare from advertisements to political ideologies are being pushed at the people, and we don't recognize it. But what's more nefarious is how they infiltrated the church, how they corrupted the church, how they attempted to corrupt the word, how these demons took over pulpits and rostrums all around the country and aligned themselves with pastors and fake prophets to mislead the masses of the church people. These pastors gave the rostrum over to politicians who had reprobate minds. Well, at the same time, you had the media and celebrities. You even had witches coming before the people, actual witches, casting spells. You had ritualistic sacrifices. You had everything attacking you psychologically and spiritually. And that's why you see people are experiencing one of the greatest mental breakdowns in history all around this country. For real. They infiltrated the church. You had pastors like Jamal Bryant coming out and elevating these politicians above God. Knowing when Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. None of the followers of Jesus aligned themselves with the politicians. That was Caesar's business. That's why Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Jesus also told you that they turned his father's house into a den of thieves. So these men who have come before you as politicians and pastors came before you with a Luciferian agenda to make you unacceptable to God. With the policies and agendas that the Democrats were going to push down the throats of the American people, they were policies worse than the policies of Sodom and Gomorrah. Even Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't terminating their babies. They had their rainbow flag in Sodom and Gomorrah, but they wasn't terminating their babies. And they had borders. You couldn't just walk in there. They knew if you wasn't from there. This was an agenda that was totally Luciferic. And because it didn't go through, the after effects, you're feeling it. And they're still stoking the fires because some of them on the left would rather destroy this country than to let it go on being the country is supposed to be. They'd rather destroy the church, the preachers, and the people because they couldn't push their satanic agenda down the throats of the masses of the people. So I want you to check out this video. It's Barack Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, Barry Soetoro, the so-called first black president who has a Kenyan African father, a Caucasian mother from the Arkansas, who has ties in relations to the Bushes, who was raised by a strong man from Indonesia who was affiliated with the CIA, who used to be named Barry Soetoro, who Oprah and Soros brought to the front of the people and backed. And the people were enamored with him because he used the words of Martin Luther King. He stood on Martin Luther King's words and actions. But when you study the history of Martin Luther King, the Democrats had spied on him and compromised him and blackmailed him and used him and almost drove him to the verge of suicide with having all the evidence of his indiscretions. And they used Martin Luther King until they couldn't use him anymore. And then he was destroyed. And that's how they infiltrated the black church and co-opt the movement. And this is why you see politicians now that are coming in that black church and take that rostrum. It started with King. And when King finally said that he realized he was integrating his people into a burning building, shortly after that he was destroyed. When King said the biggest threat to the upward mobility of the Negro was the liberal, he was destroyed. When he started speaking out against Vietnam and he started speaking for the workers, he was destroyed. But when they had him using his pulpit and using his religion, he had the masses of people thinking that they could actually have equality with the Democrats and the Dixiecrats, who are the same ones who created Jim Crow, the Ku Klux Klan, and fought to uphold slavery. And they haven't changed their shenanigans. So I want you to check out this video clip. I'm doing a reaction to the Black conservative Greg. But this first part, I want you to listen to. This is for fair usage under the 1976 Copyright Act for Education and Commentary. I want you to listen to the whole thing, but pay attention to this first part that this guy's going to say. This guy is the guy who actually ran Barack Obama's campaign. He is a political strategist. I want you to hear what he says out the gate, and then watch the whole video to the end. Check it out.
You would have had Black women who were the strongest voting bloc for. We had 107 days, and I know people don't like that time frame, that number, but to open up a Democratic primary, you would have had Black women who were the strongest voting bloc for Kamala Harris be highly upset if it was not Kamala Harris. You would have had someone starting with zero infrastructure. I hear your concern, and I'm not saying that primaries are.
What he's just said is, when they had those 107 days, they picked Kamala Harris only because she had the strongest voting bloc, which was Black women, and anybody else would have started from zero. So with that short period of time, they picked the person that they could put out there to get the votes, to get the jump start. Not who was qualified, not that it was well thought out. They had 107 days. So they just said, well, Black women going to vote for her. Put her out there. We don't have nobody else. We got to get rid of Joe.
Not important, and open primaries are important. All right, guys, so we got to talk about Barack Hussein Obama.
Joe Biden was very disrespectful last night to President Barack Hussein Obama. You saw that. Barack Hussein Obama. Remember, Rush Limbaugh would always do that into Barack Hussein Obama.
we got to talk about Barack Hussein Obama, because he is coming out here and speaking following Kamala Harris's landslide defeat to former President Trump. Okay, and Obama, you can argue, is part of the reason why Kamala Harris experienced that landslide defeat, because when Obama decided to come out and to endorse Kamala Harris, he basically went and told Black men that, hey, you just need to get in line and vote for Kamala Harris, or else you're sexist.
And you're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that. Because part of it makes me think, I'm speaking to men directly, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman as president. And you're coming up with other alternatives and other reasons for that. That's not acceptable. That's not it. This shouldn't even be a question.
And I just wonder for anybody who heard that, like what they thought of that.
Deeply offended. I was deeply offended. And it felt like a moment where it's like, you N-words better get in line.
Now, mind you, Barack Obama has never did anything to assist Black men, the very men he's talking to. Barack Obama was the president that put LGBTQ plus rights ahead of the whole entire black community. That became the movement that he championed, but yet he comes before us. You know, you have to think about the Manchurian Candidate, because you people really don't think that deep. You think everything is a joke, or you take things on the surface. But think about it. The greatest trick the devil ever played was making people he think he didn't exist. That's why in the scripture it says in Ephesians, you wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual wickedness and principalities in high places. In the Bible, it tells you about Babylon, how Babylon became the habitat of every foul bird and unclean spirit. You look in Romans in the Bible, it tells you that you got to put on the whole armor of God dealing with this type of society. But you take it for granted and you don't realize that there are spiritual principles that are being waged against you. Think about all the innocents when they're terminating these pregnancies at 8 months. Think of all that innocent sacrifice. Think about Epstein's list. Think about P. Diddy's list. Think about all the missing children, the thousands that are missing just with that border being open. That alone would make you shed it, right?
And do what we say. And it felt like him as the czar of the Democratic Party coming down to say, go get these N-words in line. And the general tone of it was disgusting. It was abhorrent. I don't respect it. I didn't like nothing about it.
Yeah. So Obama, once again, is putting his foot in his mouth in his first speech post-election, as he marketed the speech as a speech about pluralism, right? When in reality, it seemed to be about projection, right? Because he said a whole bunch of things that you could only define as him coming out on his high horse and basically accusing the other team of doing exactly what Democrats have been doing. Take a look.
Can the idea of pluralism work in the current moment? And for that matter, is the concept even worth saving? I believe the answer is yes. I am convinced that if we want democracy as we understand it to survive, then we're all going to have to work towards a renewed commitment to pluralist principles. Because the alternative...
He's talking over the audience head because he knows we don't live in a democracy. He knows we live in a constitutional republic. See, this is a part of their fear mongering when they tell you that Trump is going to do this and they're going to be able to do that. In a constitutional republic, it's almost impossible to override the will of the people. Now, they have you fooled in thinking he's going to do all these things to the minorities, when in actuality, in 1865, who succeeded from the Union because they wanted to keep their slaves? They wanted to maintain the status quo of slavery. It was the Democrats who became the Dixiecrats, who invented the Jim Crow and the redlining. When Reconstruction came and they allowed black men to be senators, and you had all those black men that were Republican senators, they created the Ku Klux Klan to terrorize them. It was the Democrats. It was the Democrats who are pushing late-term termination of pregnancies down the throat of our communities. They are the ones infiltrating our churches with the likes of Fannie Willis and Jamal Bryanson. They every sacred place that we have, the Democrats are trying to destroy. They came after the nuclear family and almost decimated it. They the ones created the crime bills. And now he talks about pluralism and democracy because he know you guys don't read. This is a republic. And that's Barry Soetoro, not Barack Hussein Obama that you think he
is what we've seen here in the United States and in many democracies around the globe. Not just more gridlock, not just public cynicism, but an increasing willingness on the part of politicians and their followers to violate democratic norms, to do anything they can to get their way.
Now he's projecting what he calls democratic norms is his inclusiveness, is the LGBT agenda, the transgendering of children. These are the norms that Democrats want to establish. These are their so-called social norms. He knows this. He is the president that passed the bill to create same-gender marriages. And ironically, Kamala Harris was the first politician to actually perform a same-gender marriage. These people are coming before you and they're using names like Martin Luther King, and they're using your religion to manipulate you emotionally. And that's why people are having these emotional breakdowns and these spiritual breakdowns, because they have let these people actually undermine their closeness to God.
To use the power of the state to target critics and journalists and political rivals, and to even resort to violence in order to gain and hold on to power. There are going to be times, potentially, when one side tries.
Everything he said is a projection. He's inserting violence. He just mentions that because he comes in front of you and he acts as if he's your friend. Why would conservatives resort to violence? They have the presidency, the Senate, the House, the Supreme Court. Who would they need to be violent against? They even have the will of the people in their policies. But the fringe group who are under the spell of the Democrats, Barry Soetoro, Megan Thee Stallion, the twerkers, and all those other people who have those different pronouns, who are on the fringe of world normalcy. These are the people he's speaking to. These are the people he's inciting because they're emotional. People are having breakdowns. They have been terrorized by the Democratic Party with all that fear mongering. And if you know anything about God and religion, he does not author fear and confusion. And that's their biggest tool, fear and confusion.
To stack the deck and lock in a permanent grip on power, either by actively suppressing votes or politicizing the armed forces or using the judiciary, the criminal justice system to go after opponents. And in those circumstances, pluralism does not call for us to just stand back and say, well, I'm not sure. That's okay. In those circumstances, a line has been crossed, and we have to stand firm.
Wow. Somebody needs to hold up a mirror to Barack Hussein Obama, who clearly lacks the ability to self-reflect, because everything this man said, trying to lecture about the dangers of the other party and what the other team might do, and what could possibly happen in this country. These are things that his party are currently doing right now. Like when you talk about using political violence to get your way, that's what Democrats routinely do. What was the BLM protest? What was Antifa? What were the Roe v. Wade riots? I mean, we can't forget there was an attempted assassination on a Supreme Court justice by a far-left lunatic, right? Somebody that's a part of Obama's party, right? On his side of the aisle. We can't forget there were 2 assassination attempts, probably more, on the former president. And we know for a fact at least one of them was in.
And right now, where I interject, BLM, Black Lives Matter, again, is up in New York, that liberal ran city. Liberal governor, liberal mayor, Manhattan DA, the same one, Bragg, that went after Trump. They're up there now threatening to destroy New York because of a racial generated case with Penny and the guy on the subway. You know, do you believe in coincidences? That things just happen. Like all of a sudden, this is on the front of mainstream media at the same time when they're supposed to be having a transition of power. They keep telling you that January 6th was an insurrection because they know you don't look up the word insurrection. It's one giant psyop. And it's coming from a satanic, ritualistic, secret society type organization that you can't fathom has that much control over your mind.
Inspired by rhetoric from the liberal media and the Democrat Party. We know that for a fact, undisputable fact.
ESPN Bet.
We also know for a fact that Trump was politically persecuted. They weaponized the legal system, the justice system, to go after their political opponents. That's what Democrats did. But yet this guy is trying to lecture people on this and to warn people about the possibility of the other team, the other party, other people doing that when that's what his party's doing. These are the same people that we know for a fact weaponize the state to go after their political opponents and journalists. When you talk about free speech, something else that Obama mentioned there, right? You know how the government was colluding with big tech in order to censor conservatives during the pandemic. This is the same party that basically set the precedent that it's okay to ignore the Supreme Court when they make rulings that they don't like, right? Like how Biden tried to ignore the Supreme Court when it comes to student loan debt forgiveness, right? And also, by the way, we can't forget, they want to stack the Supreme Court, right? They want to stack the Supreme Court with liberal justices so that they always get their way. Amazing. Again, literally everything this man said is just projection. And the part that really gets me the most is when this guy talks about democratic norms, right? And upholding democracy. You would think that Democrats would.
They put in that liberal judge, Ketanji Brown Jackson, the lady who couldn't even tell you what a woman was, who just argued in the Supreme Court that denying a child gender reassignment and gender affirming care such as puberty blockers and surgery is tantamount to denying interracial marriage. They put her on the Supreme Court. That they are arguing that a toddler as young as 2 years old can decide their own gender and by 8 can have surgery, who are parading 10 and 11-year-old transgender children in front of the world to support their arguments. This is what they're doing on the left.
To let go of this tired old talking point on democracy, right? When this dude is the chief architect of the coup against Joe Biden. This dude was responsible for overthrowing democracy within his own party, suppressing millions of votes for Joe Biden in the Democrat primary that also was finagled, by the way, right? Let's not forget that. But he was responsible for that.
Do you agree that Obama and Pelosi did not want Harris?
I know they didn't. It's not. I have a lot of friends in Obama world, and actually, I'm friends with Speaker Pelosi, and I spoke with her before I actually went on air to encourage President Biden to step aside. And I touched base with her camp before I did that.
And what did she tell you?
It's not a matter of conjecture for me. I know they didn't.
I appreciate that. What did she tell you at that time?
Well, she said it was fine that I went on air to encourage President Biden to step down. It was July 21st when I went on Fox News Sunday, and I said it was time for him to step down and pass the mantle to the next generation. It was necessary. It became clear that he's no longer able to effectively litigate the case against President Biden, against Trump. So, and Obama and Pelosi were both hoping for a primary instead of a coronation, so to speak.
Who do you think they were hoping for?
I don't think Pelosi was hoping for anyone in particular, or not that I know of. I do know that Obama was carefully vetting Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona. I know there were other names on his list. I'm not saying that Kamala Harris is necessarily at the top of the list, but he was definitely considering other candidates. I don't think she was ruled out. I just think that everyone is, a lot of people, the chieftains of the party, were hoping for a lightning round, a lightning primary. And President Biden essentially preempted that by issuing his endorsement 30 minutes after he dropped out. I don't think anyone saw that coming. We did not see that coming. I think a lot of people anticipated that he might have stepped aside, but no one anticipated the twofer that we got that day.
Yeah, so it's amazing to me that the puppet master of the Democrat Party, right, the chief architect of the coup against Biden that went wrong, right, it didn't go the way he wanted.
I'm gonna stop here because we reached the 30-minute mark, and we'll finish this up because I wanted to give you guys a couple of scriptures this Sunday that you probably should think about during these troubling times. One is Romans 8:37, more than conquerors. Ephesians 6:11, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities. Isaiah 54:17, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Because what you are up against is more than what you're seeing on the surface. And you have to realize that this was a battle between good and evil. And evil is going out kicking and screaming. They wanted your children. They wanted your children. They wanted their genitals. They wanted their genes. They wanted your placentas. They wanted your eggs. They wanted everything that is human in you to go into their laboratories and to go on the blocket, the sales market, to the rest of the world to regenerate other people, maybe even cloning. You never know. But just be mindful. So I got for you this Sunday morning. This is Detroit's HPTV coming to you out of Detroit. Support the nonprofit Detroit's Black Thought and Action Collective. Cash apps in the channel description. As always, salute to all patriots and keep your head on the swivel. Peace. Like, share, and subscribe.